The restaurant fell completely silent the moment the billionaire raised his voice. It was the kind of silence that made even the clatter of cutlery freeze. Midair, the kind of silence born from power being misused at a corner table, a teenage boy with soft brown hair and a shy smile stared down at his hands. Pretending he couldn't feel every eye on him, he was deaf, but he wasn't blind to humiliation. His fingers trembled as he tapped on the wooden table, trying to ground himself, and right beside him stood his father, a man drowning in so much arrogance that he didn't even realize he was drowning at all. He smirked, staring at the young waitress in front of him, and his voice echoed like a blade cutting through the fragile air, as he mocked her humanity. If you're so confident you know how to treat people, his tone dripped with cruelty. Then talk to my deaf son. Go on, let's see how much your kindness works in the real world. In that single moment, everything changed. The waitress looked at the trembling boy, then back at the man, who believed wealth gave him the right to measure human worth, and instead of shrinking back like everyone expected, she stepped forward with a calmness that felt almost unreal. The billionaire had no idea that the girl he was mocking had lived a life far harder and far more meaningful than his fortune could ever comprehend, and he had no clue that within 10 minutes she would break him, not with anger, but with truth he never knew he needed to hear. If you believe in kindness, empathy, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. These stories exist to remind the world that humanity is never weakness. The story truly began long before that heated moment. The waitress's name was Lyanna, a 24-year-old student working night shifts to support her ailing mother and save for nursing school. Life had taught her that people were unpredictable, some cruel, some broken, some silently screaming for help. She never judged. Even when others tried to belittle her, she had grown used to customers who snapped fingers, rolled eyes, or treated restaurant workers like disposable pieces of a machine. But there was something different, something unsettling about the billionaire who walked. In that day, his presence arrived like a storm. His tailored suit, perfectly polished shoes, and commanding stride were less impressive than the invisible pressure he carried. It wasn't confidence, it was entitlement. The staff whispered that he was Victor Hale, one of the wealthiest industrialists in the city, known for firing people without warning, ending companies overnight, and treating employees like chess pieces. But Lyanna didn't care about his wealth or reputation. Her only focus was doing her job with dignity. She first noticed the boy, maybe 15 or 16, long before she noticed Victor. The boy's eyes darted around the room as if searching for someplace safe. He wore hearing aids, though they seemed switched off, and his hands moved subtly, as if forming gestures he didn't want others to see. When Lyanna approached their table to take their orders, the boy tried to sign to her, but his father cut him off sharply. The boy immediately lowered his gaze. Lyanna saw it, the quiet defeat, the exhaustion of someone used to being silenced. She wanted to help, she wanted to say something reassuring, but Victor's presence made even breathing cautiously feel dangerous. She simply took their orders and walked away, yet she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the boy was trapped behind invisible walls built by the man sitting across from him. When she returned with their meals, the situation escalated without warning. Victor accused her of bringing the wrong dish, then insinuated she wasn't smart enough to serve someone of his status. Everyone watched as he belittled her. Cold, condescending, ruthless. Lyanna, steady but firm, explained the order had been taken correctly. That alone triggered his ego. And then, as if needing to prove something to the world or himself, he pointed to his son and issued that awful challenge, mocking both his child and the woman standing before him. That was when the restaurant froze. That was when the silence became suffocating. Lyanna didn't hesitate. Instead of being intimidated, she walked around the table until she stood beside the boy. She crouched down slightly, so she was at his eye level. Her movements slow, respectful, grounded. The boy looked startled. No adult had ever approached him that gently in public. And then she lifted her hands and began signing calmly, fluently. His eyes widened in shock. No one there had expected that. Not the staff, not the customers, and certainly not Victor. The boy's entire face shifted, softening into disbelief, then swelling into joy so pure it nearly cracked the silence around them. He signed back rapidly, excitedly, relief pouring out of him like a dam bursting open. Lyanna nodded, signing slowly to make sure he could follow, her smile filled with warmth, not pity. People watched, stunned, as she carried on the kind of conversation the boy clearly yearned for but rarely received. The billionaire's arrogance cracked right then, but he didn't admit it. Instead, he scoffed loudly and said she was just showing off. But deep inside him, something else stirred. A discomfort. He wasn't ready to face. Lyanna ignored him. She focused on the boy, asking with her hands if he was okay, if he wanted anything, if he felt safe. His answer was heartbreaking. He signed that his father never learned the basics of communication with him. Victor didn't understand sign language, didn't try, didn't want to. The boy confessed. He often pretended to understand conversations, just to avoid anger. He even turned his hearing aids off sometimes, not because he couldn't hear, but because silence was kinder than hurtful words. Lyanna felt her throat tighten, but she stayed composed. She gently squeezed his hand, letting him know that in that moment, he wasn't alone. The boy's shoulders trembled with emotion, but for the first time, they weren't trembling from fear. They were trembling from relief. The billionaire saw this, and something dark flickered behind his eyes. Jealousy, mixed with shame. His own son had smiled more in 2 minutes with a stranger than he had in years with him. When the meal was over and the bill arrived, Victor tossed his credit card on the table like a weapon. He muttered something about people who think sympathy is a skill. But then, as he prepared to leave, his son did something unexpected. He held Lyanna's hand and refused to stand up. He signed that he didn't want to go home. The restaurant held its breath. Victor stiffened, his facade cracking visibly. Now he told Lyanna she was overstepping, that she had no right to talk to his son about personal matters. But Lyanna, for the first time, met his gaze directly, and she spoke softly, with no anger, just truth. She told him his son wasn't broken, he wasn't a burden, he wasn't an inconvenience to be managed. He was a child desperately trying to be seen. She told Victor that money couldn't replace love, connection, patience, or effort. And then she told him, still in a calm, steady voice, that if he truly loved his son, he would learn how to speak in the way the boy could hear. Her words didn't raise fear in him. They raised something far scarier, guilt for. The first time, Victor's expression faltered completely. His posture sagged, his eyes wavered. It was as if he was seeing his child for the very first time, not through the lens of expectations or frustration, but through the stark reality of what he had neglected. He knelt beside his son. The entire restaurant watched, and when the billionaire lifted his hands shakily, trying to mimic even one basic sign he remembered seeing, the boy gasped softly. He stared in disbelief. As his father struggled, but tried for the first time. It was messy, awkward, clumsy, but real, very real. Tears welled in the boy's eyes. One slipped down his cheek as he signed something small, simple, but monumental. Thank you. Victor broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, with all the subtle grief of a man realizing the doors he had locked on his own child. He walked to Lyanna with lowered eyes and whispered an apology, not just for his behavior, but for everything he had failed to be. She accepted the apology with grace, but told him that the only apology that mattered was the one he would show his son through consistent effort, and he listened. Over the next 3 months, Victor became a completely different man. He hired a sign language tutor. He rearranged meetings to spend time with his son. He learned to communicate, to listen, to be patient. Some would say he changed because of guilt, but the truth was simpler. He changed because someone finally showed him the mirror he had been avoiding all his life. One afternoon, he returned to the restaurant, not as a storm, but as a humbled man. He thanked Lyanna not for embarrassing him or challenging him, but for saving the most important relationship he had. His son, now brighter, happier, more secure, gave Lyanna a drawing he made of 3 people smiling together. It was his way of saying she had become part of their small, yet growing world, and for the first time, the billionaire didn't look powerful. He looked grateful. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, comment your thoughts, share it with others, and subscribe so more people can experience stories that remind us of the good still left in the world. Before we end, comment below. Kindness changes everything. Lyanna walked home that night feeling lighter than she had in months, not because she had stood up to a billionaire, but because she had helped a child rediscover hope, and helped a father rediscover love. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew that no act of kindness, no matter how small or how risky, was ever wasted, because sometimes all it takes to change a life is one moment of courage, and one person who chooses kindness when everyone else stays silent.